Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and truth time, this is the third or fourth time I have filmed this introduction because I just keep babbling a lot. It is the 8th night of Chanukah and I have not yet decided on the technique or color for this yarn. I see many directions I could go that would fit in nicely with the palette I've created over the first 7 days, and I'm still at a loss, but I think we're going to come down to a game time decision. The yarn is pre-soaking and just plain tap water. I'm going to let it pre-soak for 20 and 30 minutes, and I'm going to go look at some colors that I have and try to finalize this. I started going through my collection of dyes and finally labeling more of the jars with the swatches from the poster, and I think I've settled on this palette. And I want to play and layer dry powders onto our yarn today. I absolutely love this technique and I think it'll be so much fun. One thing to note is that these swatch cards from the posters are supposed to represent the color that you get with immersion dyeing at a 1% DOS. So when we're dyeing with the dry powder, Sand Dune is not going to feel this pastel. It'll feel brown, probably more pigmented, a little bit like pecan brown, but I might be able to spread it out a bit more to get a wash of some of this more sand dune color. However, I won't be upset if we end up with it feeling like a much deeper brown. I have laid out 300 grams of yarn in 8 cups of water with 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. There is a lot of space here in the pan, so our dyes and colors will be able to spread out and we'll get some cool effects. I have the whole stove going on. The pan with the mini skeins has 2 even-sized burners. The one in the back has a small burner and a larger burner, so I'm going to try to keep the heat even here on the full skeins, but it'll be a bit more even over here. I'm not concerned though, because I know that this will end up being really beautiful. But again, on the full skeins as well, the 8 cups of water is enough to where we have some patches with the yarn at the surface and some patches where the yarn is underneath the water surface, so the dyes might strike the water first and spread more. Even though I'm going to dye all 600 grams of yarn at the same time, I think most of the time we'll be looking at just the mini skeins, but occasionally I might back up and show a full-on view. And as we are dealing with dye powder, I will be wearing a respirator mask, safety goggles, and gloves when I'm handling the dye powder. All of the equipment we are using today is dedicated for dyeing and is never used for food. If you want to learn more about my favorite materials and all of that, I have links, affiliate links, and even a blog post talking about everything that I use for dyeing yarn. You can find all of that in the video description. I added a couple tablespoons of vinegar to the pre-soak water and tossed in some mini skeins, and we'll be using these as yarn mops today as I switch between colors. I will be wiping the excess dye off of my fingers onto these minis and then washing my gloves off and drying them between switching colors, especially since I will be dipping back into the actual dye jars. We are hot and I just reduced the heat to low because I don't want it to be too steamy as I am adding the powder. Now, I know I have swatched all these before, but I do want to do a quick comparison of, here is some Saphire blue, which is a blue I use a lot, and some Peacock blue, which is a blue I haven't used in a while. Mainly because when I did the stock solution of that Peacock blue, and that is quite intense, I think I added a lot more. When I first did that stock solution with the Peacock blue, it didn't really all stay very well. It sort of, gosh, it crashed out of solution and was a bit annoying. But, so I don't think it's like that much more pigmented. I'm trying to see if I can feel something with these undertones.
I've used the Sapphire blue a lot more. It feels like more pastel. This one is a bit brighter, and this one is a little bit, not duller. This feels like more like a baby blue, and this one feels, I don't know, they're very, very close. I think I will probably stick with the Sapphire blue because that's the one I pulled, but I just wanted to do a quick comparison. Let's get started. I'm going to start with the sand dune, and I am adding it in sections, even knowing that I'm not necessarily hitting every single skein. I am just sort of randomly and not so lightly adding this powder on. I'm wiping my fingers off on that yarn knot and bringing in the spoon to start spreading it out. And so we are going to get some speckles in here because the colors have had a few seconds to hit. But ooh, that is super pretty, that brown. Next, I'm coming in with some bright aqua. I'm trying to go for the paler colors first before coming in with those that are more saturated. And it's okay if I layer them on top of one another as well. Then we'll come in with our spoon and spread them out. So we talked about layering dye stocks and liquid dyes to get a beautiful watercolory look, but you can also achieve that using dry powders. Now I am officially coming in with that sapphire blue, and I want a lot of this all over. I'm focusing on the areas that have the most white. And the pinches I'm picking up are generous, but I definitely don't want to go too heavy. And keep in mind that we will keep layering on color for a while, because I'm going to flip and probably do at least 2 flips where I layer on color. But again, I could sit and let this sit for 5 or 10 minutes or something, and you would get something still so beautiful. Because if I was going to just let this sit, then we would get more of those sharp speckles and less of this color that I am spreading out now as I'm going back. And don't get me wrong, there will absolutely be speckles left here. There are going to be speckles, but you can see that this blue is overtaking a lot of our color, which is what we want. And if there's an area that has a lot, we can move it to areas with a little bit less. And ooh, I am so happy with how this is going. I've now got some of this blued steel, and this time I'm coming in really lightly and just adding a few pops on some of these paler areas. Hopefully it won't spread out too much, but I thought it would just be fun to both go heavy and really light.
Now I am going to let both pans sit for 10 minutes. There is a lot of color in here, but it is starting to clear in some areas. I am happy with that, but I guess after those 10 minutes then maybe we'll come and shimmy, but we don't want like the blued steel to sort of spread out too fast or soon, but I'm just so happy with how this is going. Once the 10 minutes were up, I checked to see if the color had absorbed, and there may have been a little bit of blue left, and that's okay. I flipped the yarn and we started adding color to the next side in a similar fashion. My indecision that I had today was not due to a lack of inspiration, but I could just see myself going in so many different directions, and I had probably 5 different techniques still listed on my idea list, and I just had trouble narrowing it down and deciding which should be the last one. But the good news is that I will be doing other samplers in the future, so the things that I didn't do for this series I can do in the next one. And that is what I need to keep telling myself. Once I add the speckles that I want to be the sharpest with the blued steel, each time I will wait 10 minutes at least before flipping the yarn again and adding more color. You want to pay careful attention around the ties, but the more color you add, the more color penetration you'll get, and so then the fewer times you might need to flip. But overall, I tend to flip these types of yarns 3 times, so do a total of like 4 rounds until I'm satisfied with the color, especially when I have 300 grams of yarn in each pan. If I have 100 or 200 grams of yarn, the yarn could spread out more and there's less natural, quote, resist, and so you get more color penetration sooner. But yay, I am so happy with this color. I added on what I think is our last layer of color, and I wanted to come in with one of our leave no dye behind skeins. I've got some of that blued steel on here, but then I'm going to take this and rub the sides of our pan, because sometimes there can be a tiny bit of kick up of powder, but actually there is not much there today. And after that second pan, there's still not a ton of color on that mini skein. Whereas here are the ones that I was using to wipe my fingers. They're still twisted, and I do have a plan for these that's a little different than what I did with some of the yarn mops in this series. So stay tuned for that. But now I'm going to let things sit a final 10 minutes. Now I'm going to add on 8 cups of water with 4 tablespoons of white vinegar. This is to sort of move everything around, bring up the heat, and make sure that we are able to completely absorb the color. But as you can see, most of the color is fully absorbed already. But I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit to, since that was cool water, to bring it up to temp, but then I will let this heat for another 15 minutes. Okay, I'm now going to turn off the heat. And let's check in on our water. I see a hint of some blue, and what I'm doing is moving the yarn around just a bit, because it's to help make sure that colors have in fact dissolved. But that small amount of blue I see is not concerning me. What will concern me is if it starts bleeding when we wash it. But I am going to go ahead and leave the yarn in here to cool for a while. I would say probably about an hour at least before I remove it, just so we get that much more time for things to be wet and for the color to absorb. One other thing to note, does this palette look like that colorway that I pulled at the beginning and the swatches that we saw on the Dharma acid dyes? No. The brown and the bright aqua are much more pigmented here on the yarn than they are in their poster swatches. But I'm okay with that. It was the undertones that I was pulling that I was excited about combining, and I love where we ended up. It's not cool enough to wash yet, but after about an hour, you can see all of that color has absorbed. And we're still warm, but I can comfortably touch it. So I'm going to let this finish cooling off, and then we will wash it. But in the meantime, what about that leave no dye behind yarn? The heat is off, but the dye bath is still a bit warm. I'm taking one skein that I did not use on a warm as a yarn mop and placing it in first. So that was the palest, and then our second palest was the one that we used to wipe the edges. Now these did pre-soak with some vinegar, and as I place that in, I'm not seeing any colors come off. So we'll see how well set these colors might be already, or if we're going to start to see some colors come off and maybe bleed. Oh wow, things might be better set already than I thought. Maybe I shouldn't have put any vinegar at all in for our pre-soaks. I'm hoping that this last skein, okay, cool, we're gonna get some colors coming off on it. Now these have no zip ties on them right now, so yeah, we might have some fun re-separating these in the end, but yeah, okay, I am seeing some wash of color come off, and I'm layering them just together, untwisting them as we go. But one of them was completely bare to start off with, and these have honestly sat on my counter for a while, for that whole time that we were dyeing. So there was some time, even though there has not yet been any heat, and this was just dry powder that we were layering on. But look at how pretty that looks. Now I'm a little curious. This one I'm poking in right now. Yeah, I'm not seeing a ton of pigment come off, just a little bitty hint. But I think that what's happening is really pretty, and I should really stop moving things around because I do not want a completely tangled mess. There's a tiny bit of color left on my counter, so I'm trying to rub it on my gloves and bring it in, but it did not work as well as I thought. Can I pick up, is this our palest friend? Okay, so our palest friend is absorbing sort of like a pale blue color, but I do want to add a little bit of something else to it. Okay. So I just wiped down the counter, which added a tiny bit of pigment, not a ton. But I'm now going to heat this up and heat all the yarn for about 20 minutes. These Leave No Dye Behinds are so cute and pretty. I am really happy. That is a beautiful blue. I love the slight, very slight amount of spread that we saw. Again, I think we would have seen more if I had not pre-soaked these minis in with acid. But at this point, I'm going to turn off the heat, let them cool completely, and then we can we'll wash them off camera and show you what they look like at the very end of this video. Let's wash the yarn. I've got one of the sets of minis and one of the full skeins. And at first look, we are looking great. I am in love with this colorway so much. This is definitely one of my favorite techniques. And now I'm adding some soap. We're crossing our fingers. But I think that we're gonna be really good. And I'm loving how this fits into that family of ultra pigmented colors. So I'm now going to rinse out the soap and put the yarn to the spin dryer, hang it up to dry, and we'll come back and take a closer look at all of it. Yay! Here is all of the finished yarn that we layered. And ooh, I love it. They feel very oceany. But again, not from the palette that we picked originally. Those pops of sand dune mixed with the blue to give us a beautiful grayish tone. But I really like it as some contrast with all of these other bright hues. And the darker speckles that we added on top just really, really pop and add another layer of dimension to this non-repeating, saturated, fun colorway. The main difference, I think, between dyeing the mini skeins here and dyeing the full skeins is that the color sections on the minis look like they're shorter. And I went a little heavier, it looks like, in some of these color sections on the full skeins, which are here on the left, and the minis are there. But now I'm gonna go and twist everything up and we can take a closer look. Check out this little bundle of no dye left behind. I love that we got a beautiful pale wash of blue across everything. The leave no dye behind skeins are more muted and pastel than the actual colorway. But we have this mini little almost fade set, which is always really fun. I'm getting so into having a yarn mop of some kind to wipe my fingers on as I'm dyeing, and this really random application of color has resulted in some of my favorite colorways ever. And I'm really excited to explore this more going forward. I'm not sure how obvious it is to you, but to my eye, I can see differences between the 3 different sets of mini skeins. Here are the DK ones, which feel the most pigmented of the 3. 1 set of 10 of the fingering weight ones feel more muted, especially compared to the DK. But then there's more of that bright blue over here in that second set. Each of these were grouped in sets of 10 when I was dyeing them. And so I think that this is a great illustration of what I say about the skeins not being the same dye lot, even when dyed at the same time in the same pan with this kind of technique. Since we're adding color randomly, some skeins might have more blue, some might have more brown, some might have a little less pigment overall. There is a randomness to it. And that is why you either want to pick skeins carefully if you are going to be dyeing, say, or if you're going to be knitting or crocheting with 2 that are done at the same time, or alternate skeins every couple of rounds so that way you don't notice an abrupt shift in the colors you are playing with when you are making your finished garment. These colors are so beautiful, and I am thrilled with this blue. Tonight might be the 8th night of Hanukkah, and this might be episode 8 of the 2019 ChemKnits Hanukkah special. Don't worry, you can go catch up on the previous 7 nights. There's a whole playlist with all of the goodies in there. And I think that this blue color really rounds out this rainbow collection of deep saturated colors that I created for this series. I am just so excited with how everything has turned out. But all of you who have samplers at home might still have some packages to open up. There are more videos coming even as Hanukkah ends. You will get to see 2 different limited edition Hanukkah colorways, and there's some more leave no dye behinds in there as well. So you want to make sure that you are subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel and have notifications turned on. 2019 is not done, and there is still more exciting content that you don't want to miss. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and if you enjoyed this series and want to help support the content on the channel, go and check out the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. The shop is filled with yarn featured in these videos, and when you buy the yarn, you are helping me get more materials and that I need to create more videos. So it's a really fun cycle because in return you get some awesome hand-dyed yarn to play with. And you can go back and watch and see exactly how I made it. Mistakes, oopses, and all. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and happy Hanukkah, everyone!